right, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Guys, this is Dr. Austin Lake, who I have been following on social media for a while. I'm so excited to have you on the Jesus People podcast because you're doing what not too many people are doing right now, which is speaking up on issues that the pharmaceutical industry, the medical field are trying to silence, and you're doing it as a Christian. So I'm so curious, I'm fascinated by your story. I don't know your upbringing, I don't know your story.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it, man. So
I guess I'll say, it's becoming a little bit more in vogue now, talking about these things, which I am quite frankly surprised by, because when I first started talking about it, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, it was super risky to say what people are saying now.
You mean pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, especially during COVID, you could get deplatformed pretty quick. But now you have people like RFK, and people are starting to, I think people have had an awareness about it for a while, but having somebody like RFK, I think has really helped to provide some security with putting your neck on the line a little bit, being like, well, he's doing it. So I guess I can do it too. And it's kind of what we're talking about our pre-chat. It's like when somebody first broke that 4-minute mile, and it's like, wow, I didn't know we could do that. And then people start doing it. You know? Which
is just the disciples prayed for boldness, and that's what advanced the kingdom.
Right.
And when I watched that RFK Rogan interview,
it's wild.
It was a serious humbling moment for me. If you guys haven't watched the RFK episode on Rogan, it's bananas, because he's not just spouting off random stuff.
Right.
He's got all the data on the ways that we have been poisoning ourselves for years, and the ways that the powers that be have been poisoning us for years. So I agree with you. It's like, dang, I don't want to be labeled this conspiracy theorist, but the data is there. The money, you follow the money.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, for me, what it was is I think I've always had a bit of when 9/11 happened as a 10-year-old, I remember thinking that seems weird. I think I've always had a bit of a questioning mindset of just
building 7.
Yeah, just that doesn't.
How did that building fall?
That's weird. I don't understand. Anyway, so I think
that's not what this podcast is about. We're not advocating that as the truth, but
wrong road here. Yeah. Allegedly. So I think God gives us such an inquisitive mind that we can tap into, of just asking questions.
Yeah.
And seeking answers, which ultimately is supposed to bring us back to Him.
Amen.
And I think we, as a society, we have created religions within health, within politics, within all these different...
Dogma.
Yeah, dogma. Everywhere you go. And so I think, but we're always seeking truth. We're always seeking it whether we realize it or not. And so I think even the term conspiracy theorist was designed to create a bad image for the person that was questioning the authority, right?
Yes.
When the reality is, we should never discourage that. I think we should always be having healthy debate and questioning everything, but always trying to get back to truth whenever possible.
For sure. Yeah, because the truth sets you free. And so when it comes to something like food in the pharmaceutical industry, it's not like we're saying there's lizard people that control the world here.
Are we though?
I'm not saying it. But really. Yeah. No. It's just factual.
Sure.
And now you're seeing the mainstream media turn a blind eye to facts. And if we're the salt of the earth, then that means that we are a preservative. We're the flavor and we're the preservative of the earth. We're the remnant that's supposed to bring the kingdom in this world now, where there's info wars everywhere. There's culture wars. There's this, we're getting to the point where we don't even know what to trust anymore.
Right.
We've got deep fakes now coming out. We've got media that are manipulating everything. And so how did you get into this? I'd love to even just hear, what's your faith background? Because this is the Jesus People podcast. And this is an important episode. This episode is not just here's some good medical advice, or here's this is not medical advice.
It's not.
It's not. Right. Let's not get you sued here.
Right. Yeah, please
this is not, the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is just because I see few people that are exposing truths in statistics and data from a Christian perspective, and saying this is our duty as believers in Christ, because the truth sets us free. Where there's no vision, the people will perish.
Right.
So where did that come from?
Oh man. So I've had to look back on this because I think as you go through life, you kind of just keep taking your next step, you know. And there wasn't much reflection because I think to a certain point, like I didn't have the capacity to reflect on my past. But the more I look back on it, the more I start to see just how I was given a really, I don't know, like I was given like a one-sided example of how health can look in a very like negative way. And this isn't to like fault anyone in my family or anything like, but my brother got leukemia when he was 14.
Dang.
Saw how all that went down, and there was a misdiagnosis that really was just I was 12. I was just like, how do you miss that? You know, it's like got me curious about.
Wait, he was misdiagnosed leukemia?
Yeah, so he was misdiagnosed as having like a groin strain that like it wouldn't heal for like months and months.
Wow. And
instead of like, maybe we should do some lab work and kind of investigate a little bit further, they just kind of let it go on. And yeah, he almost died of leukemia.
Wow.
The crazy part about that story though is that we were living in Iowa. I was 11 or 12, and my parents just felt like they were supposed to leave Iowa. All our family was there, and they felt like a calling to go to Salt Lake City, Utah. And that was just like such a mind-boggling idea for our family, because we're very like Central America, like nobody leaves this place. This, like my town was 980 people. Like it was just a very small existence. And so we all pack up and move. Dad gets a job out there, and within 10 months of being out there, he gets diagnosed with leukemia. Come to find out, the doctor that saved him was like the expert, one of two experts in that type of leukemia. And
your parents, they're like, okay, now we know why we felt the call.
Yeah, if he would have stayed in Iowa, he would have been dead because there was just no doctors like that. And so he saved him. And so that was like just like, wow, that's cool. And so that all happened, but parents got, just like a lot of debt from all that stuff with him, a lot of stress. Dad was working 2 jobs for a long time, like 80, 90 hours a week kind of stuff. Like manual labor wasn't just like desk work. And so he ends up having a heart attack when he's like 42, which is 7 years older than I am now, actually. That's the first time it kind of hit me now. But so he has a heart attack. All this stuff starts happening. Mom starts having health problems. She's not sleeping. She's all stressed out. It's just chaos all the time. And so convenience foods become part of our routine, like just instability in the home, high stress, always working, just kind of like just a lot of difficult things just to like survive, right? And so, looking back as a kid, it was just like, well, this is just how life is, But I started getting chronic pain, chronic fatigue. I started getting really severe ulcers, stomach ulcers, when I was in high school, because I had some back pain from football and would pop like ibuprofen all the time and just started getting stomach ulcers because that's what they do. And nobody knew what was going on there. So I had chronic pain for like 10 years and just felt terrible. And my mom's developed an autoimmune disorder. Dad had another heart attack, just like all this crazy stuff. So I just knew that at that point in time, I was like, I don't think this is the only way for people to live. Like I see like these other people living a certain way and they're not having these problems. Like, why is our family suffering so much? And I think part of it was just like, that was just kind of the cross to bear. And, my parents stayed faithful to God the entire time. Like they never wavered on that. Always showing us, like always taking us to church, always like demonstrating like what it means to be faithful despite challenges. But it was still just like, gosh, like why do we have to go through all this stuff, And so it just got me more and more intrigued about health. My doctorate's actually in physical therapy. So like that's where I got the doctorate. And then I did 3 more years of functional medicine board certification after that. Wow. And that's where I got like my real education on health, I think. That's where everything kind of came together. But I never prescribed medication. So I was always thinking about how do you do these things naturally? How do you get people healthy? Like how do you get out of these ruts? And it really just started to kind of open my eyes that like God showed me what it was like to not be healthy and like what it would look like then on the other side of the coin to break some of those habits and kind of get out of that mentality in that life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're watching your family and yourself have this sickness growing up, and then did you make a decision? Was it like you just started geeking out on health, or was it like?
No, I mean, I think honestly, I met my wife.
Okay.
And
how old?
I met her when I was 22.
Okay.
We got married when we were 23.
Dang, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy looking back now. I'm just like, I still feel like a baby, but like we were such babies then.
Yeah.
Even more so now.
Yeah. You and I are like the old dudes in Christian social media. You know that, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but everything's for probably like in our 20s. At least that's the comments I get. So. Yeah, I mean, that's what I like to think, you know.
Dude, I was at Richard's house the other day, our filmer. You can't see him right here. I was at his house the other day, and this dude comes up to me, and he goes, how old are you? I'm like, well, you tell me, bro. He's like, I don't know, like 40?
Oh, shoot.
I was like, oh my God.
See, that happens occasionally. Oh. You get like an actual honest person, they'll tell you what they think, and it's like, you can see the wrinkles, and it's like, I'm old. So, no, so I met my wife, and I think, you know, she just like started making real food. Like she would make meals, and she would like just take care of our house and like do these things that like I as a man just never, like I would eat Hormel chili every day, and like occasionally I'd have enough money to go buy like a rotisserie chicken on Fridays.
Yeah.
And like, wow. But I just like would just eat like garbage and just like had no concept of what I had a little bit of a concept, but like when it really came down to like what I actually practiced was like, I didn't give two hoots about health. Like I thought vitamins were a huge waste of time, waste of money, expensive urine. But my wife, she was just like,
expensive urine.
Expensive urine, yeah. But my wife, she started taking care of, like she just took care of me, and she kind of just like, I think nursed me back to health enough to where I was like, wow, like I feel different through this food stuff. This like apparently there's something to this.
Yeah.
And you can't just eat a protein bar for lunch. Like you have to eat real food. And through that, I started getting more intrigued about it and had a rotation in school where I was working with a guy who was very holistic, and he healed himself of like a cancerous tumor and started just showing me all these things and telling me all these things and gave me several books that I read. And I was just like, wow, this is crazy. So that was in like 2013, 2014. Yeah. So that was kind of the start of it.
Dang.
Yeah, long answer.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I mean, it's like, I feel like the Lord often does that, right? He'll take us through something, and then he'll, like, so we see the dark side of it. Personally, we personally experience the dark side of it, and that creates the anointing, but sometimes it just takes one person in our life that pushes us there or models it for us. Like your wife, that was discipleship, you know?
Yeah,
she like discipled you into it, and but you had the anointing all along.
Sure.
So as you look at the world now, and you've got your degree in physiology, and then what was the 3-year?
So functional medicine.
Functional medicine.
Yeah.
So you've got your functional medicine degree, and then you had mentors take you under your wing. Were you learning all these things and then contrasting them with what you had learned before, or what you're hearing, you know, your colleagues being taught?
So what was interesting is, again, I kind of had, like, I had it happen early to me, like, you know, I guess 14 years ago. No, about 12 years ago, to where that was kind of my initial education on the whole topic was there's this whole world out here, but it was still considered like quackery and woo-woo and all that. And I was just like, that probably is. Nobody else is talking about it.
Kind of like the more naturopathic way, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, just like people would, because the way that you're trained when you're getting a doctorate is like, you're trained to think that like, if you don't know it, nobody else knows it. Like there is nothing to know. Like you know all things in this category. Like this is
full pride.
Yeah, like top down, like you're the top. Unless somebody above you is telling you something different. And so you kind of have this mentality going into it of like, if this person is saying something that I've never heard, like that's not illegitimate. It's not backed in research. And so that was kind of always in the back of my mind, challenging this idea of like, well, you can't focus on that because it's not founded. And so, but as I started going through it, I started seeing just more and more of my own patients that were having issues. And I started just like seeing the connected dots, and I was just like, this isn't like, there's more to it than just what we're seeing here. Like there's something underlying that we need to address. Like you're not sleeping, you're not eating nutritious food, you're obviously deficient, you're having cramps all the time or whatever. And like, we have to do something else, you know? And so I think through that, I started to kind of just to have this focus. And again, I think, you know, it's just the Holy Spirit just said like he kept pushing me in that direction. And for me, it was women's health was what I started seeing the biggest need. And I can talk about that as much as you want me to.
I mean, I have a pregnant wife, and so.
Oh yeah. Women, and this is where I think this is a little bit of an offshoot with the conversation, but women are just like, you know, they experience stress about 40% more, like perceived stress, like about 40% more than males. spiritually, biblically speaking, I started asking those questions like, well, why are women feeling this way? Like, why do they feel more targeted? And I think there are just pure physiological differences that would create more of this like protective nature with a woman, because like she maybe can't defend herself as well as a man could. Like, I see a guy walking down the alleyway, I'll size him up, and if I think I can take him, I'm not stressed. If I can't, I may get a little bit stressed. A woman, it's like, there's a man here, I'm stressed. And so that's just one example. But I also think there's this cultural issue of, you know, like the feminist movement did more harm than good.
For sure.
You look at like how they focused on like, you know, birth control and getting out in the workforce and doing all these things that can be done well, right? But when you add on all that to your existing stress load of raising children, managing the home.
It's a lot, dude. And
then you're now providing financially and working for some other household in a sense, like you're managing two households, like with your work household and your household. I think it's an added load of stress that women are experiencing that nobody's really talking about, that is creating this issue of, you know, they're 5 to 8 times more likely to have hypothyroidism than males. They are like 3 times more likely to have autoimmune disorders. 80% of them have hormonal imbalances. Like serious stats. That's like just tanking infertility, tanking longevity, tanking just day-to-day, you know, joy really is what it can do. And so I started seeing that, and I was just like, man, like I can at least help in these areas with women's health. And it comes through like, hey, you got to sleep, you got to feed yourself well. Like you can't, if you're focused on convenience is a killer, you know, of health. I think families are so busy that like they don't sit down and prioritize a meal. Like our homes are hotels. Like we watch Netflix and we go out to eat, and it's just always this like pass through. But it's not like a home to where like we kind of cultivate a home environment with our children, where we do worship, where we do meals, where we bring people in. At least some homes aren't that way. And I think that's part of the problem with our health as a culture is we're all too busy. Like women are not at home. Like, you know, men are doing all like whatever. And it's just like there's no real like family nucleus, I think, that we can provide some stability. And that, I think, it drastically affects health.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I was just having the conversation with my wife this morning as I'm going off here to, you know, film the podcast. And we've got a sick daughter at home. Luckily, one of our kids can go to school, but like she's there with a baby and a sick toddler screaming, and just the look in her face, I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Like it's just, and she's pregnant. So it's like, hard. Oh my gosh, dude.
It's a lot.
And so you're saying that women are stressed at a level that maybe society does not understand. So the feminist movement is saying, well, you need to work and you need to also take care of the home. And it's just so much pressure on these women. So the hormonal imbalances. And that to me is just a tactic of the enemy. You know what I mean? Like what does the devil come to do? He comes to give death. What does Jesus come to do? He comes to give life and life to the fullest. So what's he attacking? He wants to kill the babies. He wants to kill the health of the women. He wants to kill the fertility. He wants to kill the joy. He wants to kill the hormones. He wants to take everything from order to disorder. He's an agent of chaos. And so how do you see that playing out, even in the forces of light and the forces of dark, when you're looking at the world right now and looking at the pharmaceutical companies, you're looking at nutrition? What are you seeing happening as you've been in both worlds now?
Yeah, I mean, I think pre-COVID it was pretty bleak. To be honest, I think I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, or like, I don't know if my voice even is enough to start any kind of ripple effect. But I think, again, there's been a huge awakening with our society. At least I'm hoping. We'll see how today goes and the future goes from here on out. But
today's election day.
Today's election day, if you guys are watching after this. So I think the thing that I've realized is that I can only impact the people that are in my sphere. And if I can get them to believe it and have a conviction about it, and then go and tell their family about it and live it with the people close to them, it will truly start to cause a ripple effect to where we won't go out and buy the foods that will allow the companies to actually make a profit off that kind of stuff.
What companies?
Like Kellogg's was the one that was more recently in the news, just because they're a major cereal brand, and cereal is just like a very
healthy food,
healthy kid food, right? That like people give their kids all the time. And there's just several key ingredients in our United States Kellogg's that's not in 33 other countries around the world that are developed.
That.
Yeah,
Crazy,
so like that's one big example more recently. But there's tons of examples like that to where, we feed our children, we feed our citizens chemicals, and the problem is the FDA, their system of classifying what a chemical is or a toxin is there's like 10,000 or 100, like it's like 10,000 or 100,000 chemicals that like we know of, and there's like 200 of them that are to be considered not safe, but like the problem is they wait until there's enough of a negative response before they then say like, oh, it turns out this does have an effect on people.
So they let enough people drink the poison and be like, oh, now we hit our threshold of 100,000 people dying. Yeah. It's now bad for you.
So they were just talking about this. I think it was some podcast, but they were just saying, there was there's a lot of companies, pharmaceutical companies out there that will knowingly release something out into the public, and they'll pay the fee of whatever litigation fees there are. One example was, I can't remember the company, I probably couldn't even say the company if I did know it, but they made like 13 billion. They got sued for 5. So they made like 8 billion. So it's like, I guess that's a good profit.
They're like, test us.
Sure.
They're like, we don't care.
Yeah, so there's a lot of those examples, and like I think it's 33% of drugs that are on the market will get recalled.
Golly.
So there's just that just happens all the time. So like there's drugs coming out all the time that like people are experimenting with that have been approved that then turns to find out they're not safe. And the reason is that like toxins, they'll say that the dose makes the poison. And sometimes that's true. Like if you have a certain dose of whatever poison, it won't be poisonous for you until it reaches a certain toxic level or toxicity level. And so,
but who knows the effects? It might not kill you in a week,
right?
But continuing to take something over the course of years, who knows what's going to happen in 15 years?
Well, there's that. Yeah, exactly. Plus this combining other toxins into the human body with these other toxins. So like you get this culmination effect to where it can compound pretty quick. And that's what happens often with our immune system, is that we get toxic air, we have toxic water, we have toxic candles, we're sitting on flame retardant materials in these couches, our clothes are made of polyester, and then you're eating foods that are now sprayed with glyphosate and herbicides and pesticides, and there's no real nutrients in them. And not only are they not helping to solve a problem, they're actually causing a problem with what is in the actual food itself. And so you're just getting bombarded with toxins, right? And so people often you say like toxins, like such a weird word, like what does that even mean? But like it can be anything that's harmful to the body. It can be exogenous, meaning on the outside, or endogenous, meaning it's coming from the inside. And so either way, our immune system has to deal with it. And so that's what's happening on an ongoing level from a regulatory, like FDA perspective, is that they're just kind of like waiting for a response to see how we do.
And is this just kind of a money is the root of all kinds of evil type deal, or where is this coming from? Why? Because I would think that the United States of America would want to be competitive with Germany or Japan. Be like, we're going to have the healthiest people, but that's not the case. Why?
I think the only way to destroy America is from the inside out. And you can't attack us from the border or from the air because we're so powerful. But if you kill off its people, you make them, 77% of males are not fit to even qualify for being in the military. They wouldn't even pass a test. And so you have that problem to where you just start obliterating the male population. You make them effeminate with, their hormones. You drop their testosterone. You have no desire to go out and fight for your country. And it's a great way to just win a battle without ever having to fire a bullet.
So you think this is an outside force from other countries? Like what?
I think, the World Health Organization has they have a lot of claims that they've already made in statements about how, they think depopulation's a good idea.
Yes.
And how, you'll be happy and own nothing, great reset mentality. And so.
Which is, again, that's just out there. It's not a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it's not even conspiracy at this point. Like 3 years ago.
They're literally saying we don't want more people.
Right.
And then we look at our foods, we look at our hormones, we look at the pornography, we look at all the things that are, again, going against life. The kingdom of God is producing life and life to the fullest. And so it would make sense that the kingdom of darkness would not only just want to create death, but it would want to create a life that looks a lot like death.
Yeah, and I think, the kingdom of darkness, the way I see it is through deception, as always, right? Like you take something like food in the garden and say, no, this is going to be good for you. Like this is going to open your eyes, right? And he used food to do that, right? And so I think our Christian culture, man, it drives me insane, really, if I think about it. We don't talk, it just feels like we don't talk or do anything that's really hard or difficult. Like we like to stay so like in the middle all the time. And I think, for me, it's like, Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace. He's like, I came to bring division. I'm bringing a sword.
Yes.
And there'll be division as a result of that. And I think it doesn't mean we cause harm or we like fight people, but it means that we stand for something. And I think Christians, like when it comes to food, number one, there's an ignorance problem where we don't know what we don't know. That can harm you, as God says in Hosea chapter 4, I think verse 6, like lack of knowledge leads to destruction. There's also an iniquities problem where we do things knowing that they're not good for us, but we do them anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's a very spiritual problem. So like we have to address the ignorance and the iniquities, I think, as Christians, but we have the Holy Spirit to do so. Like we have the greatest cheat code ever. Amen. To like tap into self-discipline and peace and patience and all these things. And I think as Christians, we're just like going to flow like everybody else is like so deceived. And like we should be the healthiest people in the world.
Yes.
Like all those who follow Christ, like comparatively, I think we could be the healthiest, not because like it's prosperity, but because like
you're following the kingdom.
You're following the king. Yeah.
Yes.
And like you're advancing the kingdom. And that takes a clear mind. It takes discipline. It takes all these things that God has given to us already. Like it's already been given to us. It's not that we have to earn it or that we like earn a certain level by being 45 or whatever. It's like, it's given to you.
Yeah.
We're just like, no, I'm good.
Well, I think two of the largest sins I would say it this way. I think the two most overlooked sins in the entire Bible, number one, gossip. It's mentioned 150 times in the Bible.
Wow.
That's triple the amount of getting drunk or having sex outside of marriage.
Wow.
The second one, I think, is gluttony. You go to a church on Sunday, odds are the pastor himself is going to be morbidly obese. And of course, there's hormonal things that play into that.
Sure.
As always, it's not a one-size-fits-all deal.
Right.
But largely, Christians should look healthy. Why? Because we're looking at the scriptures. We're saying, what is the kingdom of God?
Yeah.
And we're ripping the veil off of the demonic structures of the pharmaceutical companies, of the food industry. And we're saying that's not ethical.
Right.
Like the way they're treating animals is not ethical.
Right.
Number one, let's start there. Number two, I refuse to put that in my temple. So why has the church been so blind on this issue?
I don't know. I think again, because getting back to our earlier part of the conversation, you have to trust the experts, right? Like that's what we've all been told. And the reality is, it's like, who's truly an expert on all things? Like we've all been so siloed into thinking that like, oh, like this neck specialist is like, she's an expert on this region of your body, but she can't talk about your pancreas or any of your endocrine system. And it's like, okay, that's weird. She spent all this time in school. So like we have this whole siloed system in medicine. And I think that comes out into these other areas of life where it's like, well, I'm not an expert. Like this is what they said. And so if you go back to 1910, that's when everything started as a real downfall in our country, because that's when the Flexner Report came out, which was funded by Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie.
Good guys.
Great guys.
Yeah.
Stellar dudes. I'm sure they're wonderful.
Yeah.
They were wonderful. Rockefeller owned 90% of the petroleum. So when they started to learn that they could synthesize vitamins, because everything up until that point was holistic. It was homeopathic and natural medicine all across the country.
A lot more autism back then, right?
Oh yeah, it was everywhere. And cancer was all over the place.
Totally.
And, heart attacks, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know about heart attacks actually, but I can't imagine it was that high. But anyway, so 1910 comes around, they decide that they need to standardize medicine, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I think that was probably a good idea, but it ended up closing down like 200 and some schools that were natural based, that were at that point standardized.
Schools meaning postgraduate doctoral programs.
Physician schools, all that stuff, med school. And they instead say that like they start funding John D. Hopkins and Harvard Medical and all these different schools, and provided them the curriculum that was based in pharmacia or pharmacy or pharmaceuticals, that were based in petroleum, because that's what he profited off of. So it was like, hey, here's all these drugs that I profit from. Here's a new curriculum. Here's a new standard of education. teach it to all of our students, and that was in the early 1900s. And so it's been going on ever since then. And so at that time is when they started creating this whole idea of, if you go against that narrative, you were a quack. And that's when that whole term came about. And so that's what we've been fighting against for over 100 years. And most people don't know that. So whenever you think, well, I'm trying to do what I think is best, and this is what my doctor told me to do, he's the doctor. Why would he intentionally want to do me harm? His Hippocratic Oath says do no harm. So he's not doing no harm. But the reality is he or she is trained in pharmaceuticals and surgery typically, but no education in nutrition, no education in real lifestyle management, anything like that.
Yeah.
And so you're going to this expert who can't help you beyond a medication. And so when you start having symptoms from that and you get more medications, people are so surprised, like, I don't know why this guy, like, I think I trust him. He's trying to help me.
Yeah.
And I would say, yes, he is trying to help you to the best of his ability. But he's also been trained and deceived just like everybody else. And so he thinks he's doing what's best.
And that, my mind really opened to that reality when I started having friends who were doctors. So these are buddies that I grew up with, friends that I went to college with, brilliant dudes.
Sure.
And watching their opinions change as some of the stuff started to come to the surface. Like, for example, again, we bring up the RFK episode on Rogan. I pinged my buddy about it, who's a very successful doctor, and he was mind blown.
Yeah.
He was like, everything
idea.
he said is true. All the data's there. Like, this is really changing my opinion on this.
Wow.
Which almost was freaky for me, because again, I had that mentality of he knows it all. He's been to school.
Right.
And
why wouldn't he?
He's just seeing facts that are out in the open, right? Hidden in plain sight. This stuff's out in the open.
Yeah.
And now he's mind blown by it, and he's got all the schooling, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what are we missing, and what are they suppressing? Let's talk about the suppression. Do you see that happening that much in the media?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the time. I mean, anytime you look at any ad on TV or the whole problem is research as a whole is so easy to manipulate that if you ever want to get a particular result, you do a research study on it. You know, like what is your agenda with the study? And if you want to get a particular outcome, you can very easily manipulate the study. And so that happens all the time, to where if you don't have...
Say more about that, because I would, like, I have two brothers that would probably, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, what would they say right now? They would probably jump all over that statement and be like, no, we're doing double-blind studies. So I have two scientists in my family.
Oh, really?
One just got named like top 40 scientists under 40 in the world.
Wow,
the other one
impressive.
is a professor at London School of Economics. They're brilliant dudes, and they would probably jump all over that. So
rightfully so. So, and again, it depends on the study, it depends on who's funding it, but you want, like vaccines, for example. Turtles All the Way Down is a really interesting book for anyone who wants to look it up. It's a great resource.
It's a great name, Turtles All the Way Down.
Yeah, it's like vaccine science and myth. It's two Israeli authors that are anonymous, so like we don't know who wrote it, but it's really well researched and studied and backed with data. That's all mainstream data. It's not fringe studies or anything like that. It's really well founded studies. The example that they gave is that, say that you're studying a vaccine, like the polio vaccine, like that first one came out, and since then they'll do comparative studies against like the polio vaccine, for example. And what they'll do is, like, instead of having a placebo that says, hey, like nobody's had a vaccine, like this is just salt.
It's just a control group.
Yeah, saline. Yeah, just a control group, placebo. And this is the new vaccine that we're studying. Instead of like comparing against the placebo, they'll compare against the original vaccine or another vaccine.
Yeah. And
so like you're not getting a true, so like, for example, it's like, well, the control group, they had, let's just say 16 out of 100 people had a symptom. And then the new variable, the new study we're doing, the new vaccine we're studying, 24 had it. Mm-hmm. So a small percent increase, not a big deal, no adverse reactions really, like, don't worry about it basically. Mm-hmm. When the reality is, if you compare that to a placebo, a true placebo, that's still a significant difference, right? And so clinically relevant potentially. And so that's where a lot of these studies that they're doing, they're looking at vaccine efficacy and safety to determine, like it's safe, it's not harmful, but you don't consider that you can't isolate in a double controlled placebo trial. Like you cannot, like if you have just one variable, when you can't consider all the other variables that go into something like the ingredients that are in a vaccine and how it interacts in your body, like you'll never be able to say this causes autism. Mm-hmm. You can say this is maybe a correlation, but it's not causation, because you have to, they want to make it so controlled to where you know for absolute certainty that that caused that. When the reality is that's sometimes nearly impossible.
When you've got so many inputs.
You take all these other inputs into it and you don't consider the other fact that like this child is also getting 72 doses of vaccines before they're like 7 years old or whatever. And so it's like that's where it becomes really messy, to where people are like, well, it's safe and effective. And I'm like, how do you really know? Yeah. And then you start looking at the rate of autism and how it's gone from, I think, what was it, 1 in 10,000 back in the 80s or 90s, and now it's like 1 in 35 or something like that. I have to double check those stats, but it's like, it's significant. And it's like, well, what else could it be except for the fact that we've more than tripled our doses on vaccines.
Well, I mean, it could be a number of things, right?
Well, it could be a number of things. It's also the food. It's also the environmental pollution and toxins and all that. But I think, I mean, if you do your own research on that and you look at what happens to a lot of these kids these stories never get heard, they get stuffed.
Yeah. Vaccine injuries and
Vaccine injuries, yeah. Like I think if RFK gets in, he's going to blow the lid on it even more, and it's going to be, people will have to face the reality of what's actually going on.
Yeah, dude. I think a lot of truth's about to be exposed.
Yeah.
Hopefully, God willing.
So. Yeah. That's why there's so much pushback, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there was that thing circulating on social media, right? It showed just the graphs of kids who received 0 vaccines versus kids who received all the vaccines, and just their doctor visits and. Did you see that?
I shared that. Yeah.
You shared? Okay. Yeah. I saw it from. I'm sure I saw it from you as well, but I saw it from multiple people.
Yeah.
So I was about to ask, was that a legit study? But
there's a lot of things you got to think about that. So that's just looking at doctors' visits. So it's like people can make the argument of, well, people who don't vaccinate their kids aren't going to take their kids to the doctor. I don't vaccinate my kids. I mean, I vaccinated my first 2, and I haven't planned to vaccinate my other 2. Mm-hmm. Like at all. And again, if you look at that study or that Turtles All the Way Down book, you may come to a similar conclusion when you finally understand like what that's doing to kids. And again, I would never would have said that a few years ago.
Yeah, that would have been.
I couldn't even spit that out,
Yeah.
But now I'm like,
you would just get
I don't vaccinate my kids.
Yeah. So this is not like a scientific study or anything. This is just my anecdotal evidence. But my firstborn son, we vaccinated, and dude, he's got eczema.
Yeah.
I mean, comparatively to my other 2.
Yep. Same with mine.
Right? And I've talked to so many people about that, and they're like, oh yeah, my kid who did the same thing, who did their own research, who looked at what the data said.
Right.
Like, again, this is not just looking at an article online and being like, that guy said vaccines are bad, or this influencer said vaccines are bad, but actually doing the research. Yeah. Again, watching the RFK interview with Rogan, this is a dude who studied his whole life, and he's just spitting studies, scientific journals. Like, this is what he's sharing. And after I watched that, I kind of had to almost repent. I was like, dang, I was so blind. I just kind of went down the old path. And that's not saying that the Lord, there's not grace and mercy. And that's not even saying there might be things we're missing. Sure. And that it's all bad. I'm just saying there's a lot of bad.
There's a lot of bad. There's a lot of bad. There's also a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there is good out there too. I think, if you get in a car accident, you need a life-saving procedure. The United States is the place to be. Mm-hmm. Like, we have some of the best physicians in the world, procedures in the world. But when it comes to disease management and longevity, we're overall we're 37th as far as quality of care. Like, our maternal and infant death rate is some of the highest in developed nations. And so we don't do well when it comes to caring for our citizens. So there is tons of evidence that shows there's a lot of bad. There's some also good evidence that our doctors are some of the best doctors in the world. For sure. For what they're trained in.
And what they're trained in is not preventative.
No.
If there's a crisis, if there's an emergency, you want to be in the States.
But think about if we started to reward doctors and all healthcare providers for health. Like, hey, your client got better and they're healthier, and we reward systems and hospitals for that, and just had the opposite mentality of not how can we keep them longer here in the ICU, but how can we get them out quick, and how can we, actually help them heal and reward people for that, I think our system would start to change a lot faster. Right now, it's rewarded for long-term medication and procedures and more time spent in the hospital. And I think that's a good place to start.
For sure.
Just flip it around.
You just follow the money.
Yeah.
Like everything you're talking about, from Rockefeller to the current hospitals to the pharmaceutical companies to the companies like Kellogg with Red 40, and it's all just money, because that cereal might not sell as well because it doesn't have the colors.
Well, I don't think that's, like what we were saying before, I didn't know if that's it. I think it's much more nefarious than that. I think I have no problem with, that's what I do. Like I'm glad that I get rewarded for helping people heal. Like that's awesome. Like people get rewarded for helping people to be entertained. They get paid to be entertained. Like there's different ways that getting paid is not a bad thing.
Sure.
Like making money is not a bad thing, but doing it nefariously and killing off a population or reducing the population, like that's so dark and so wrong that that's the problem. And you get into this whole, I can't even go into this conversation, but there's so many examples of this nefariousness in our world that people are profiting off of dark things. And I think that's where I have a major problem with all this stuff.
What's the motivation though? If it's not the money, what is the motive? Is it just a purely demonic agenda?
Yeah, it's demonic. I think it's demonic. What else would it be?
Yeah.
I think we all, again, deception is what allows us to perpetuate a sin. Like it allows us to keep stumbling on it. And if it's like, there's this deception to where it's like, no, I'm doing the right thing, or like, it's not that bad or whatever, like they're doing worse, then it's like, you'll just keep doing it. But like there's somewhere you cross this line somewhere to where it becomes so demonic, and honestly, whether it's oppression or possession of a person's soul, like I think that's where some people are. Not everybody. I think a lot of people are just in this more like just deceived, but some people are truly just like gunning for God's kids.
So what do we do about it?
This. Speak out against it. I think we have to, Christians have to like actually change their family first. Like they have to start in their own household. That's the first mission field. Families are just being decimated. Like the apostasy of the church, like children are like 70% of children are apostate, like after leaving their home, like they don't follow the faith. Like so something's wrong with our family nucleus, something's wrong with our church, to where it's like we're cultivating a
rock show.
Yeah, we're cultivating a rock show rather than like the God show or whatever you want to call it, the gospel. Like, and like I think we have no idea. We're just all trying to be entertained and deceived again. And I think the church is unfortunately playing a big role in that.
Okay. So it starts in the family. In terms of the health and nutrition, because again, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone listening to this. They're like, okay, great. Like,
what do I do?
I have to do mac and cheese because I have 10 minutes. Like what is your, is it literally just saying, hey, we need to rethink everything now?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to start at the foundation and work your way up, because the mac and cheese is just a byproduct of the house that you've built. I think for my wife and I, what we've tried to do is, I work from home now, which wasn't always the case. My wife used to work, we both used to work, and we moved to one income, and it was rough at first, but it was worth it, right? Like I wanted my wife to be at home with our children, and I wanted to be there eventually. And so we started asking questions of like, well, what do we want, or what do we think God is calling us to, and what do we want our life to look like? And then then it created this idea, this image of what we were shooting for, to where you can then figure out the steps backwards to where we were on how to get there. And so we had to kind of create that image, go for it. And then it happened within like a year and a half, like of us saying like, this is what we want. This is what we think God's calling us to. This is what are good for our kids. This is the trajectory we want to go on. And it happened so fast. And what I realized is that in my prayer, I wasn't asking for anything else from God until that point. Like I was simply just being like, God, thank you for your provision. Like, thanks for keeping my kids safe, all that stuff. But like one day my wife and I are just kind of like, why are we not asking him for more? Like, why are we not asking him, like, why? We don't even know what to ask for, first of all. It's like, God, what do we need to ask for? Like, align ourselves with your will so we can rightly know what to ask for. And then we started praying in that mindset. And that's when it started to become more clear of like, hey, this is what will produce healthy, godly children. And this is what it's going to take for you guys. like, okay, we'll do that. And so we start doing it. And now I'm like, my biggest struggle right now is not knowing what to ask God for. And that to me is just like the most humbling thing ever, because I know that if I have a heart for what he has a heart for, and I'm asking for that stuff, it will be done.
Yeah.
And I believe that 100%. Like before I like blew up on social media, like I had like 100 followers plus my mom's friends, you know?
Yeah.
And I realized like at that time I had a conviction that God gave me of like, I need to say something about it. And like I saw stuff happening with COVID. And so I had a conviction to say something, but I was like, okay, God, like if this is a real conviction from you, I need you to deliver on this, because I need to know that I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it was like literally that night I had a post go viral, and I was just like, okay, keep doing more of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, here we are. But I think for a family, if you're trying to figure it out, you got to create that environment, that culture. You got to figure out what that looks like first. And then you got to do some hard work to make that happen. But I think if you're not spending time around your children and they're being educated and influenced and fed by everybody else except for you, I don't know how that's going to go well long term. But if your long term goal is to have God-fearing children that are after God's heart and like spreading His gospel, like it's going to take some effort and some changes, but it's totally worth it. And it doesn't mean that having your kids in public school is like going to ruin them, but it's definitely going to be a challenge. Like you're not around them as much, and then they have extracurricular activities, and you have 30 minutes before bed to like have some kind of influence when they've been influenced all day. Yeah. And so for me, it's like I want to be around them as much as I can. I want to create an environment to where we can prioritize mealtime and making food. Yeah. And we're not going to go out to eat as much, which is good. We save money, and we also don't eat all the garbage that is being fed to us. And we get to be together. And so that may not be forever. Like they're 7, 5, 3, and 6 weeks. So like they're still pretty little. But I know that if we can create this culture now, when they are in high school and beyond, like we'll have the greatest influence on them. And as long as we're after God's heart and He's speaking to us clearly and we're educating them and discipling them, like I believe that I don't think they'll depart from that wisdom. I think they'll always hold on to that.
Yeah. So you're saying step one is vision.
Vision. Yeah.
Get with your spouse and say, what kind of life do we want to live? What kind of life do we want to give our children? Or even if you're a single person, who do I want to marry? What kind of lifestyle do I want to live? What foods do I want to eat? Yeah. And then with that vision, you'll have life, but without vision, you'll perish. And with that vision, you'll be able to set a culture that will last for generations. Yeah. You'll actually train your children up in the way they should go. Yeah. What would you say are the first steps to get there? Like, what foods should we be avoiding? What habits, what lifestyle habits are destroying families? Yeah. As far as foods, I would say, so anything that's genetically modified means it's been sprayed with glyphosate, because the glyphosate will demineralize the weeds that are going to be causing, wreaking havoc on a crop. And so glyphosate will demineralize the weed, but it also can affect the crop itself. And so that's when the genetically modified came in to actually create these new foods that wouldn't be harmed by it. But those are not real foods, right? And they're also not containing much nutrients. So you can have a strawberry that's actually not that healthy for you.
Oh no, like there's so many examples of, across the board, it's probably down 30 to 80% from like nutritional value 50 years ago to what it is now. Wow. So like we're eating more cardboard, for lack of a better expression. And there's no nutritional value, but there's that plus the toxic component, like I was saying earlier. So like you're also getting this burden now.
So it's less vitamins and minerals, more toxins.
Yeah. So get organic whenever you can. It helps. It really does. If you can find a local beef supplier in your state, if they can travel across state lines, at least from what I've been told, it's somewhat regulated to where it's probably going through a very similar process as conventionally raised beef. Mm-hmm. So like my guy, he does grass-fed, grass-finished beef. It's not, all the grass is clean. They don't get a bunch of vaccines, all that stuff. So the beef is like, it's good. It's really good. And it's about the same price as what you buy per pound in the store. So if you can find something local, and if you have a friend who has a chicken or two that has eggs, get those eggs, because a lot of the eggs, I had one of my clients was a scientist, and she, at least what she told me is the eggs in the store all kind of go through the same process, like whether they're organic or pasture raised or whatever, like they kind of come out the same way. And so a lot of my clients have issues with eggs. Either whether it's a histamine response or a protein within the actual egg itself, it can trigger a lot of immune system issues. So having like your own farm fresh eggs can be very helpful if you're feeding them well, or if you have a friend that does it or a farmer's market, so get quality eggs.
Well, dude, one of my beefs is I look at the chickens and the cows, and I'm just like, as a Christian, I have a real issue with how they're being treated.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I know I don't know, it might not be cool to be like an environmentalist as a Christian because we're all supposed to be hyper conservative and like whatever, America. But dude, I look at how these animals are being treated and I'm like, this is awful. And then I think selfishly, I'm like, I don't want to put that in my body. I don't want to put those stress hormones in my body.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the top down, it's just demonic.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like, so you take a good thing, like, oh yeah, good quality beef, great for the body, versus like conventionally raised beef that's like been raised in the way that you just described, like not so good for you, like carcinogenic, can cause cancer, like all those different things. So that's where, again, you have to remove the ignorance side. And this is where digging in deep on the knowledge is like so important. Like we all have to kind of go through that. We can't just say, I don't have time for it. It's like as a father, I'm sorry, I'm touching my microphone. As a father, like we can't just pass off all the health stuff and food stuff to our wife and say like, you deal with that. Like we have to be in it with her as a family and say like, I want to know what I'm feeding my child, and I want to know what we're injecting in their body with these vaccines, and I want to know what they're up against in school or whatever. Like we have to be in it as fathers, like as head of the household, and we kind of pass those things off. So I think that would be one thing I would say is second as a step as a dad is like take some initiative with the food. Like you may not be a good cook. Like I'm a terrible cook. Like I can't cook hardly anything. My wife's an amazing cook, but I'm like the one researching all the information about what is good and what's bad and all that stuff. And so it works well as a team. But
I think even you look at the original sin of Adam, it was passivity.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, so we just can't be passive. And I think our culture as men, we're quite passive. I think it's from the start,
Totally.
Since Adam.
Yeah, man. Well, that's fascinating. It sounds like there's been quite a turnaround in your family.
Yeah.
Have you received any hate on social media? I'm sure you've received a lot, but have you received like what kind of stuff? Because I'm seeing some of the stuff you're putting out, and it's all rooted in science. It's all backed in the literature, and it's all it's all biblically sound.
Sure.
What's been your experience being like a Christian health doctor on social media?
Oh man, I don't even know anymore, honestly. So I have people tell me all the time, like, man, people are so mean to you in your comments, and I'm just like. Yeah, I didn't know that. Like, I don't. If I read it, I just skim past it. So I don't read it much anymore. Like when you start getting, a few thousand comments on stuff, you're just I can't. Like So the way I look at it is I have a healthcare practice first, and then I use my social platform to talk about what I've learned and what I've seen to work. And I don't consider myself to be like an actual influencer or whatever it is. Like, but
too late, bro.
What is now? But
I find it gross too.
Yeah.
When people are like, oh, this is my friend Ryan, he's an influencer. I'm like,
don't say that. I have a real job. No, I think for me, it's like, I know that I've been a part of some awesome stories with real people. And so people can say whatever they want. And I'm just like, I pray that you get there one day. Like I pray that you can get past this, this veil can be removed from your eyes.
Well, I would have been making fun of you about 4 years ago.
Yeah, I would probably make fun of myself. Not 4 years ago, but definitely 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would have fully called you a quack, a nut job, until I started doing my research.
Yeah, and again, I think it's just God's gracious and He's merciful, and like there's so many categories of life like that, where it's like you think you know it, and then you go through it, and your eyes are open, and you're just like, oh wow, I was so wrong.
Yeah.
So I think there's grace for that.
For sure, man. Well, I'm grateful for you coming down and joining us.
I appreciate it.
I've just loved following you. I've gained a lot from it.
Good.
Where can people find you?
They can go to, it's dr.austin.lake. You can search my name on the internet and you'll pop up somewhere. I started doing these like 5-day challenges that are for women, but they're kind of just walking through a lot of these things that we've talked about and just kind of like how we've gotten here and kind of how to start getting your family out of it. Because really, I forgot to mention, like the reason I work with women specifically is that it's the main pipeline to the family. If you can get the mom stable, everybody benefits from it. And it's really hard, but I think if we can focus on that through taking care of, if a woman can take care of herself, she can better take care of the people around her. And that's really the main goal. So I have a 5-day challenge where I walk women through that. And it's just like an introductory to kind of get them used to it, but they can find that through my social media as well. So,
awesome. Yeah. And I think as husbands too, it's like if our wives are one body with us, then we should be caring about the nourishment of their body just as much as our own.
Yes, I could talk about that for a while too.
Go ahead.
I mean, so this is like a whole other story, but my wife and I were, during COVID, probably almost ended our marriage.
Wow.
I was like building my business and just absent-minded and not caring for her really, not loving her well. And there was a sneaky pastor that tried to sneak his way in between us, and she was working at the church, and he weaseled his way in over time and nearly destroyed our marriage. But in that whole time, we've healed from that amazingly. We've had 2 kids since then. And the thing that I realized was that all that happened. Obviously, she had a role in it, but it was mostly me that just failed to nourish her and love her and care for her and all those things that God asked me to do that I failed at. And I think, the one thing I would say to anyone's watching this is, the only thing that got us out of that was, I had a good buddy that was, he kept telling me, he's just like, just pray for your wife. Like, pray with your wife is actually what he said, like, pray with your wife, not for her. And that's like the hardest thing to do when you're not feeling it. You know?
Yeah.
But it was like the one thing, because I would feel like the spiritual weight of just the whole situation all the time. And I couldn't even communicate with her sometimes. And it was just like, when we prayed together, despite all my flesh just saying no, it just snapped all that spiritual weight and just crumbled in front of us. And I just could see her and us for who God created us to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one thing that we don't do is we don't pray with our wife.
Dude, the stats show 1 out of 1,152 couples that pray together regularly on a daily basis will be divorced. Only 1 in 1,152 couples.
Yeah, wow.
And so you wonder why you feel awkward going to pray with your wife or your husband. It's like, oh, this just feels weird, feels really vulnerable. Do you think maybe the enemy has anything to do with that?
I'm sure.
Because when you yoke up together, a strand of 3 cords, you, your spouse, and Christ, a strand of 3 cords can't be broken.
Right.
And the devil is working overtime to destroy marriages. And he knows that prayerlessness leads to disunity, and disunity leads to divorce.
Wow.
And so if I'm the devil and I see that 2 flesh becomes 1, and that's a picture of Christ in the church, what do I want to do? I want to get in the middle of that. I want to destroy that thing. And what's the fastest way I can do that? Prayerlessness. Oh, it's kind of awkward to pray with your wife. Right. She doesn't really get me. I'm bad at praying.
I'll
with
say
her.
the wrong thing.
You know what that's called? Cowardice. And if we're the head of the household and we're seeing the stats, 1 in 1,152 couples that pray together out loud every day will be divorced, and we're not praying with our wives, that's cowardice. It's stupid.
Just drop the mic, man.
Well, it fires me up.
Yeah, it should.
Because I talk to men that I mentor, and I'm like, are you praying with your wife? You're coming to me with these struggles that you're having in your marriage. And they're like, she just doesn't get me. It's kind of awkward to do it. And I'm like, don't talk to me anymore until you do that.
Yeah, go do it.
Go do it. It's cowardice not to do it. And you're inviting the attacks of Satan. Like, what does the Bible say? It literally, Peter is being tempted in the garden.
Yeah.
Right? What does Jesus say? He says, pray that you don't fall into temptation. So how do we not fall into temptation? How do we not get weird in our relationships and get selfish and be me-focused? You pray with your spouse. Something happens in the spirit. It's like this dome, this shield gets brought over your home when you're prayerful, and then you get exposed when you're prayerless.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's good. So good. I don't even know what to say to that. Yeah, I mean, the thing that came to mind, I think it was in 1 Peter 3, somewhere, 7 maybe, is talking about love your wife and all this stuff, and basically not loving your wife is a great way to experience unanswered prayers.
Yes.
And I'm just so true. You're
man.
Failing at your first mission.
Yeah, there's 4 ways in the Bible that your prayers literally get blocked from God. One is you don't take care of the poor. That's why I talk about Compassion International so much. Like, I love that organization because when you take care of the least of these, Jesus says you've literally taken care of me. I'll put a link in the description or a link in the bio here that you can actually go and support a child in poverty. It's an amazing organization.
Yeah, it's really cool.
The second way is if it's not in the will of God. So like, God's not going to answer a prayer that's not in his will because he's a loving father. The third way is if you're praying to suit your own passions. If you just want to like get rich and so you're praying for a Lamborghini, God's not going to answer that. He's a good father. And then the last way, like you said, 1 Peter 3:7, it's this wild statement. It says, husbands, if you're not living in an understanding way with your wives, your prayers will not be answered. They get blocked. And I don't think that's just like speaking to husbands. I think it's unrepentant sin blocks our prayers from being heard. And which is such an important text for us as husbands, because it's like, man, if this is my own body and I'm not looking out for my own body, which is us now, like we are now one flesh, like marriage is a death. It's a beautiful death. Two become one flesh. That means your former self died. So if you're not viewing it that way and then putting her needs above your own needs, why do you think God's going to bless your life? No shot, dude. And that starts with saying, having the vision to say, what home do I want to cultivate? If you're not starting with vision, the people perish. Who are the people that you're in charge of? Your family. Your wife and your kids. So if you're experiencing lifelessness in your home, guess what, dudes? It's on you. Like it's the onus is on the dudes to take care of the vision of the household. And to take care of our wives and to make sure that they're well-watered vines, that we're doing everything we can because they're the weaker vessel. And that doesn't mean that they're just weak or not competent. That means that they're like a beautiful piece of china when we're like Yeti mugs. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And we need to be gentle with them. We need to live in an understanding way. And we need to take care of their hormones, which is a crazy thing to think about. It's like, am I feeding my family garbage that is contributing to harming not only my children's growth, but my wife's hormones? So, I mean, I'd love to hear more about that from you. That you're kind of the expert on that.
Yeah. So I think again, the first thing you have to think about with that topic is the hormones are messenger molecules, and so they're responding to the environment. And so if the environment is such that it's creating disruption through chemicals or whatever, that's an easy one. So like endocrine disrupting chemicals are a hot topic, right? But a bigger one is inflammation. So inflammation is truly where I see the biggest issue through food, is that if you're eating a food that's causing oxidative stress, which is inflammation, you'll have hormones that now are like, well, we can't prioritize thriving, but we can prioritize surviving. So we're going to transition over to a cortisol more dominant response through your adrenal glands. And for females, especially as they get older, they don't make progesterone as much through their ovaries, and they require more production through their adrenal glands, which is that stress, where that's where stress cortisol is being produced. And so the more that that's being taxed, the more that cortisol is being required, the more that progesterone will drop, the more that estrogen will likely convert poorly, be recirculated, it gets stored in fat. So as soon as you try exercising, you lose a little bit of weight, those fat cells release those toxins, they get recirculated back in, and you feel terrible. And so you don't ever make progress. And so women have this extra challenge of losing weight that men really don't have. It's there, but it's not there as much. So estrogen are those things. So any food that's going to promote estrogen. So soy is a big one. Drinking. If you drink milk that's full of hormones, or you're eating beef that's full of hormones, like those will have a estrogenic effect. A lot of these, things like birth control are stopping the ovulation cycle of a woman. So you have this really disrupted monthly cycle to where it's not normal. You start to deplete other vitamins and minerals that help you to methylate or detox well and produce energy well. And so you get this very vicious cycle that happens for women specifically, to where if you have something like MTHFR, which is like genetic mutation, if you have that, which about 60% of women do, and you're having this environmental issue that I described with, you're eating a bunch of cereal-based products or folic acid-based products that are like, a lot of breads have folic acid in them that are not clean. They can start to create more issues with methylation, and it can become very synthetic and very toxic for a person that has that. So you just feel terrible.
Yeah. A
lot of women that have that are on a prenatal that were taking it while they're pregnant, and then they are now postpartum after the baby, they often will be detoxing that folic acid because it's not natural, it's synthetic. Folate is what's natural. That's what we want to be taking. folic acid, it has to be cleared from your system. And if you don't do it well, you can feel like you have depression. You can have postpartum depression.
Whoa.
I mean, a lot of them, it's just like they're detoxing this stuff out.
So you're saying that a lot of postpartum depression is coming from detoxing folic acid?
It can. It can. Depression's an interest. I mean, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but a lot of depression and anxiety is because is being caused in your gut, because your gut microbiome is connected to your brain. Your enteric nervous system is like what's connecting the two systems. So you get nervous, you get knots in your stomach, right? Like that's the same. If you have an inflamed gut, you may have brain fog. You may get those symptoms that or you get anxiety, or you don't sleep well because 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. That makes melatonin, that helps you sleep, helps you do all this stuff. So everything's connected. So women are definitely at risk, and that's how you can definitely help support women. Is I would say a good B complex is absolutely vital, preferably a methylated one. Got to have magnesium. Magnesium is depleted with cortisol. So the lower magnesium status you have, the more likely you are to be stressed. The more stress you have, the more you're going to deplete magnesium. So you definitely have that. You have to have magnesium. Omega-3 fatty acids are vitally important to reduce inflammation, help with brain health, joint health, hormonal health, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's where you can
start.
start.
I got to ask you, I saw you put out a post the other day that was talking about weight loss.
Yeah.
Tell me more about if I wanted, not for me, for a friend.
No, yeah, sure, right. No, yeah.
If I wanted to drop about 10 pounds, what do I do?
Okay, well, you got to sleep. You got to have a consistent bedtime.
Yeah.
You want to get your circadian rhythm dialed in. So circadian rhythm is a biological clock that is with the daylight. And so daylight savings really messes people up for a reason, because our bodies are relying on that stimulus, that signal all the time. So when you have an inconsistent bedtime and you're eating too late in the night, you're watching TV, you're on your phone, whatever, before bed, that's going to mess up melatonin release. And so you're going to be sleeping poorly, light sleeper, more likely to wake up with an alarm clock, when the reality is you want your body to wake up naturally so that you can wake up feeling energized, because your cortisol should wake you up. If you're waking up through an alarm clock, you could be like really low in your sleep cycle, more in a deep state. And
I'm waking up through a screaming baby at the top of her lungs.
That's different.
Right
that's not
through
going
the
to last
monitor
forever.
into my ear.
That's not going to last forever.
Yes, thank you.
Apparently, we're going to miss that one day, but I don't know if I buy that.
No chance.
Yeah, I don't think I buy that. Yeah.
You're going to miss this.
But you want to get your circadian rhythm dialed in. So if you can start waking up naturally, that's the first thing. And then you want to not skip breakfast, not skip lunch. People always say like, what about fasting? You can fast by having breakfast. Like, fasting is technically the time you stop eating until when you eat again. So if you stop eating later in the night, you can start fasting from like 4 or 5 or 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock the next morning. And that would technically be fasting, right?
But intermittent fasting, if I'm going to go fast for 48 hours, that has significant health benefits, right?
Yeah. So we could talk about this for a while. So for a woman, that can be challenging. So fasting is a stressor. So you want to make sure that you have your normal circadian rhythm dialed in first. You cut out inflammatory foods. You get your basic nutrients met, like I mentioned before. And I always say eat 80% of your calories before 2 o'clock. Like if you can eat most of your food with the sun, you'll start getting a lot of benefits without having to do anything. It's like having a good financial investment. If you kind of get that set up, you're making money without having to work harder for it. And so that would be one thing. Essentially is you want to get those ducks in a row with other areas of your health before you get into like longer term fasting. Like the intermittent fasting, like 16 hours a day, like that's just kind of a normal way to eat. We weren't always grazing on food all day long like we do now. Like that's more of a newer thing.
Fruit Loops.
Yeah, convenience foods were never a thing, back in 1800s, right? And so we have this luxury of eating all the time, when the reality is it's good to have digestive rest. It's good to let your gut settle and focus on other things. And people are often snacking. So we don't want to snack. We want to have real meals, most of your calories before 2. And then you can have a lighter meal before 6, 6:30, 7, and that will be like a good fasting window. Getting into like 48-hour, 72-hour water fast, like that has tremendous benefits. If I always said, if I ever had cancer, I would get into like a 72-hour water fast, and I would do that routinely. I think that would probably be the first step that I would start to take, because it starts to kill off all those cancerous cells, and it's a good tool.
Yeah. For sure.
So
for sure, man. Dude, fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us more about the 5-day challenge you were talking about.
Yeah, so it's a 5-day challenge that's biblically and functional medicine based. So I kind of talk a lot about these things we're talking about already. It just kind of go more depth on like a meal plan, a supplement protocol, how to start kind of actually implementing this in real life. Because a lot of this, again, just information doesn't do you any good unless you implement it, right? And you have to know what the right information is to implement. And so I help my clients implement this information.
And this is just women?
Just women. Mostly over the age of like 35, but probably like 45 to 65 is most common. So perimenopause, postmenopausal. But we have a lot of younger moms too. So it just kind of depends on where you are and the struggles you're having. If you're having a lot of these issues, you qualify, you'll benefit from it. But it's really designed to help you and your family actually change things and overcome the obstacles, because it is hard. Like, you don't always know, like, what do I eat? Like, how do I feed my kids? Like, what do I take? Like, when do I take it? Like all these kind of questions that pop up.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people watching this might be having some of those questions like, okay, well now what do I do?
Yeah.
And so that could be a great option. Would you also just pray for the people listening? And as if you're listening to this and you're feeling the Holy Spirit tap you on the shoulder and say it's time to lock it in, it's probably time to lock it in.
There you go.
Dr. Austin Lake is a great resource for that. So if you could just close us in prayer.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Father, we just we come before you, your kids. We trust that you are who you say you are, that you're good, that you're merciful, that you're provisional, and that you love us. And we really believe that. And we're so thankful because we know that we can come to you and ask for good things, and that you're gonna give us what we need. And Father, I just pray for people that are watching this, listening to this, that they would just put their trust in you if they don't already. That they know that everything that they've ever done has been forgiven, everything. And there's no better promise than that, that we can come to you faultless, forgiven and free. And so we pray that over people watching, and just over Ryan and just his crew. We're just thankful for them and the blessing that they are to so many people. We just pray a blessing of protection and of continued, just continued advancement of your kingdom. And I pray for other Christians out there who are considering advancing your kingdom in different ways, or that they would just be bold, and that you would strengthen them to do so. We love you and we praise you. Amen.
Thanks, man, for being here.
Of course.
And guys, I would just encourage you. I think oftentimes we can silo our relationship with the Lord and have it be like, oh, it's just church and it's just, reading my Bible. God has come to bring a new kingdom. And there are forces of darkness at play, and that, man, it starts with what we're eating. And so I think just take some time and pray, get with your spouse if you're married, and just ask the Lord, what is the vision you want me to start with? And then begin walking out that kingdom lifestyle. And it's going to be healing and refreshment for your bones and your soul. And so grateful for you being with us.
Yeah, man, appreciate it.
God bless you guys.